So let us understand what is Terraform, why do we require Terraform, how the life of Terraform and without Terraform, how it was, and we'll see some few examples in today's session. And this is our agenda, so that we're going to cover in this session. So what is Terraform? So Terraform is popularly known for its infrastructure as a code. So we use Terraform to automate the release of infrastructure without any human intervention. Okay, so this tool is used for building, changing, and versioning the infrastructure safely and efficiently. Here are some reasons why Terraform is widely adopted. So multi-cloud support. It's not only stick to some specific provider, so it supports all the cloud provider, that is AWS, Google, that is GCP, Azure, and any other one. So this allows team to manage infrastructure across different cloud environment using a single tool. So that is Terraform, providing consistency and flexibility. So probably people might be thinking, what is infrastructure as a code? You are keep saying that is you are mentioning the infrastructure. So what is infrastructure? Is it a building or something else? No, absolutely not. So when it comes to Terraform, the infrastructure means the resources or the machines, I can say that. So probably it could be VPC or your virtual computer, virtual servers, anything, or the virtual network. So these are the words in cloud. We altogether call it as infrastructure. Okay. So without Terraform, so before Terraform, how the team used to manage all the infrastructures. So assume that if you want to build the infrastructure and deploy the application, so that is you want your own servers to be configured, and you need to deploy your application in that server and should be accessible outside it. So we required individual server. So I need to purchase server, I need to purchase network, and I need to install Docker and the required tools. I need to create another server for database, and I need to maintain the security as well as the firewall, everything. So everything each and independently I need to put a concentration, and I need to make over all the dependencies just to deploy a single web application. Okay. So later we can deploy the Docker application. So once we are all done with all this infrastructure, altogether call it as the infrastructure, that is. So this all together we call it as infrastructure. Okay. So later we can deploy once all this infrastructure is configured and ready to be used by the SRE, that is service engineer. So the later on the deployment process will be taken by care by the other team. So later we can deploy the application in our Docker application. So these two, to do this we require two different teams. One is the DevOps team for configuring the infrastructure, and the software developer for deploying the application. So there are many resources we required, and the time consumption and as well as the cost will be quite more, right? So to overcome all these things, so these are the infrastructures, and once we are all ready with all the infrastructure or the requirements, what are the hardware components and the software, networking, everything is all set to deploy our product. So once it's been ready, and we got approval from the Saturday, so we thereafter going to deploy our services over the Docker applications using the Docker app, right? So to develop and manage a simple web application, we require two teams with a lot of money as well as time, complexity, everything. So we required one team to configure all the infrastructure and one team to develop and deploy the application. All right. So without Terraform, this was the issues being faced a long time. So to overcome all these issues, we have just come up with the concept of Terraform. So in Terraform, we gonna write, so whatever they have taken here, that is server, network, Docker, tools, database, everything. So that we going to write it as a code, that is infrastructure as a code, right? In the file, that is .tf file. We'll see that in future. Okay. So this is a quite introductory about Terraform and why do we require Terraform. So let us understand what is the difference between Terraform and Ansible. Some people says both are similar and some people say both are different. We use for different perspective. We'll understand why exactly. So here the Terraform comes into picture where it takes care of creating the resources or the infrastructure and installing the tools into the server. So the Terraform works on provisioning the infrastructure. So we use Terraform for provisioning the infrastructure. So whereas Ansible is configuration tool, that is it only configures the infrastructure and deploy the application and updates. So for example, that Terraform will take care of all the infrastructure related codes. That is, it's take care of creating the required suitable server, network, right, and the database security. Everything will be taken care by Terraform. So and Ansible, that is the software developer team or the deployment. So if you want to deploy any applications into your Docker, so you should have some applications and the dependencies to run your thing, right? So we need some packaged container and we required some versions as well as the image storage and the portable to be exist and in what manner I should access in if we release any updates how it should be updated in my that is production infrastructure. Everything will be taken care by the Ansible. So that is what they are mentioning here. So configuration tool, it is also the Docker. So if I want to deploy my web application, so I required some platform to deploy my application, right? So for that I required Docker to be installed on my server and other dependencies which are required. So if you are automating it, I required Jenkins to. If I am using Java based web application, I required my one. If some other language, it's required its own dependencies, and the latest version should be updated for security purpose. And each and everything will be completely handled by Ansible. That is in Terraform, we call it as script. When it comes to Ansible, we call it as playbooks. Okay. So Terraform is better for infrastructure, whereas Ansible is better for configuration. So configuration is nothing but application configuration. So we completely take care of configuring and keeping up to date of our applications, right? That is why we make use of Ansible. So how exactly the Terraform is going to work if we think about it. So initially we have provisioned the infrastructure and deploy the application, right? So later if we want to manage infrastructure that by adding more server security to existing infrastructure to add on more features to existing application. So let us understand that previously we are in the season of Dussehra as well as the Diwali. So the sale is on all the e-commerce platform that is Amazon, Flipkart, and many more, Mintra and all, right? So in these seasons, the traffic will be more to the server as well as the database, and there might be a chance of security breaches in between that. So the company not only keeps an eye on providing the proper service to the end user or the customers on the day of sales or the on the sessions of sales, even they have to keep concentration on security too. So since as many traffics are flowing in and out, there might be a chance of weak in security at a time due to denial of service or there are multiple requests will going to fall on a single server. So on that situation, if you I want to handle very seamless service to the end user to provide, I need to scale up my existing resources or the infrastructure. That is, if I have one server, I need to scale up by two based on the that is traffic I'm receiving, right? So the database will remain same because whatever the data, the server one owns, the other server two also owns the same data, and it's fine. But to interact with that data, we require some interface. That is nothing but the server, I can say that, or in other word, when it comes to EC2, we can make use of either the Lambda or the API gateway or the EC2, right? So we need to scale up automatically. So if it is been working in manually, so the person has to analyze all the things, and he needs to keep monitoring how exactly the CPU utilization and the RAM utilization, memory utilization is working on. So does it really require to scale up? And we are the person in himself is to actively keep monitoring the complete CloudWatch, right? So when it comes to Terraform scripts, everything will be scripted if they mention the certain criteria, that if the traffic and the CPU utilization reaches to 70%, so automatically add another or create new instance with same details or the template which is provided. So on that scenario, the infrastructure or whatever the Terraform scripts owns it, automatically it going to add up the another instance by providing more reliable service to the end user. Thus, the Terraform made this work easy by managing the infrastructure automatically without manual process. So once we are done with that is once if we put an effort to just develop the script and manage the CloudWatch for monitoring all the systems, and once we are done with configuration and automation things, it's not required someone's to monitor that. So automatically based on the traffic inputs, the file will going to execute, and the resource will be available very soon to the end users. So here we are not doing any manual process. So based on the criteria, it is doing by its own, right? So and also we can replicate the same infrastructure once the testing is done. That is in the production infrastructure. So for example, so nobody is going to deploy any of the softwares or the products live to the end users. So initially they deploy it for testing. So if the same testing, whatever the infrastructure or the environment dependencies, whatever they have used is working well and good as per the expectations of the client or the product what we are expecting. So once it is being done, obviously we going to make use of same infrastructure code for the production also. So that is what they are achieving. So to achieve all these things, we need to create a Terraform file where we code what needs to be created, configured, and where should be created. So for example, so if I am launching some or if I am deploying some web application, so what needs to be created? I need a server, that is web server, and the database to store my data, and the network for communication, right? For maintaining the securities and all, I will be configured, and where. For example, if I want to create in my that is provider, I can say that, right? States how the current infrastructures look like. So core. So it takes two input from Terraform file, that is config and the state, compares the config file and the current states. If any difference found, then plans. So every time we gonna run some steps, right? So that will be automated actually. So to understanding, I will just show you in future slides how exactly it's going to work actually, right? So just assume that we are we have heard about versioning, and we have seen the versions also. So for example, so while creating some or while editing some files, we can make out that we use the options called undo, right? So that whatever the current state of the file and what is the previous state of the file before making any differences. So by we can just make out by using the undo options. Likewise, in Terraform files also, just now I created that one server along with that that is RDS or the database. I connected it, and just I keep running. So immediately after that, for the same Terraform file, I gonna add some other resources. For that, I need to add some S3 bucket. So have some constants data to be displayed. So I don't want that data to be interactive. So on that case, I don't want to store it in database. So just I'm gonna keep that data as a always available to the end users whenever they access. For example, it might be a documentation, policies, and order histories, everything. Okay. So on those files, I need to store in S3 bucket, and I wanted to that will be accessed oftenly by the end user. So again, if I want to go and creating and linking them to RDS, that is sorry EC2 and all, it will take a quite long time. So what I'm going to do is I just modify my Terraform config file by adding the S3 and linking to the EC2. So based on the IDs, resource IDs we gonna use, right? Once we are done, we going to again the trigger will happen, the process will move on, that is Terraform format plan. In planning section, the Terraform file will be reviewed. So what exactly the current infrastructure is running and what needs to be added, does it require any modification is going on from the current file which is running, everything will be monitored, and based on that it will going to deploy. Okay, so it will make the differences. So we can create, update, destroy everything using the single file itself, but just by modifying the very few lines. Okay, so here we come across some comparison configuration and the current state, right? So we have some specific words or the technical terms we make use of it, that is declarative and imperative. So imperative configuration, that is removing and adding. That is if you want to upgrade our existing infrastructure, that is adding. And if I want to remove or exit or delete the resources which is not been used by that software, so that for that purpose we call it as imperative configuration file. And declarative says what exactly the current plan or the what the exact or the what is present infrastructure is running. So that is being said by the declarative, says that the current infrastructure what has already having, right? So these are the commands that help us to achieve us to create the resource actually, right? So the Terraform unit. So here we have another magic that so if you are running Terraform in any of the instances of the server or the system, so always make use of having the best practice of creating the directory or the folder. Inside that you deploy or you create your own Terraform file. So Terraform file in the sense that we not only you make use for creating the infrastructure of EC2 RDS, we are not limited to that. We going to explore or we going to create numerous services which are available on the ISP, that is sorry not ISP, that is cloud provider. So we have many services, right? So we can able to create all the services irrespective of limitations of creating it. Only if we have a very minute inputs we can. So I will going to show you in how exactly the Terraform file will be looks like and how it is being coded and how it is being mapped, everything will be shown. Okay, so the Terraform init command will provide, so it going to create an environment and it setups the requirement or the dependencies and the validate. So it validates the syntax, so whether is the whatever the coded format is, it is in valid format or not. So if it is not valid, if I got any error here there, so just I pass the another command fnt, so automatically it will format it if it is not formatted. Then the plan, so here the plan will display, so what are the resources to be created, where it should be created, what is the configuration of that resources to be created, that is the infrastructure, everything will be shown in the plan. So as I previously mentioned, so initially I create with the EC2 instance with the Decremeton and Ubuntu image. So thereafter I need to link that to RDS. So first plan will be EC2 will be created and so region with the memory of 8 GB with the CPU of anything. Okay, so that will be planned here and that is got executed after applying it. Okay, so again I modify, just I going to add RDS or S3 bucket and I'm going to link that, and again I run that, that is validate plan. If I directly comment this one, that is Terraform plan, automatically the previous command will be executed. Thereafter the plan will come into execution. Okay, it's not that if I start middle, the previous steps will be skipped off. There is nothing like that. So even though if you just pass the command as Terraform apply, it will follow the same procedure. That is, it will going to look for any dependencies missed out, and it will validate, format it, plan it, then only it will going to apply or the create the things. Okay, so the plan will be of kind of blueprint. So it will provide how exactly the output will be of kind. So is there any difference? Definitely, it will show what exactly is happening. Any creation, any modification, any destroyation is going on. It will throw, and it will give us the subline, and it will show us. Okay, so once we pass Terraform apply, automatically whatever the plan we have a blueprint, right, that will get executed and created in the desired location. So if you want, okay, so I will have created here, just I have created two resources, that is EC2, S3, and RDS or review. So assume that the company has many resources, so they are completely moving into somewhere else, or they are shifting something, they are upgrading it. Okay, so they don't want to complete all those resources. They have probably 15 plus resources they are using to run their application. So if I want to delete all those resources to avoid overcharging or billing from the provider, so obviously if I am not using that resource, I should delete that immediately after usage, right? So if I keep on visiting all the resources and deleting it, if it is linked for another resources, again I need to map there, I need to delete that resource, again I revert back, I need to that existing resource, I need to perform all this. So it will consume time, right? So to overcome that also, we have a command called Terraform destroy. So whatever the file owns code, infrastructure code, so that will get vanished just by passing Terraform destroy. So before Terraform destroy, the Terraform plan will run. So it will look for it. So what are the resources will going to destroy, it will show us. After the confirmation, the Terraform destroy will happen, right? So let us see that some examples. Okay, so the Terraform snippet I have just dropped here. I will show you even the script too. So here initially we need to provide the configuration or the provider, which provider I'm using. So right now I'm using the AWS, followed by the region where I wanted to create in which region, and I should create IMA user. So because in root user I cannot able to create that. So for that purpose we make use of IMA user. That is, we going to provide an access for that particular user to perform all this activity. Okay, so for that we need to create a IAM user followed by the secret key, and the snippet tells, that is cloud service provider details and user details and access. Okay, so here I am just creating an S3 bucket in Amazon. Okay, so for that purpose we make use of the keyword resource. Resource in the sense what resource I am using, in which provider, in AWS S3 bucket, and what is resource I wants to create, that is S3 bucket. And here is something like a tag, I can say that, or the label I'm using, like example. It's not limited to label, you can name it whatever you want. Okay, next bucket. So in S3 I need to create bucket. I need to name it as my Terraform test bucket, that is TF stands for Terraform, that is the extension, and followed by the tag name. My bucket tags are used for linking resources under one environment, that is environment dev, or that is the development. Okay, so we'll go and see that what exactly the Terraform file looks. Okay, so here I have some previously created Terraform file for creating EC2 as well as RDS in a single security group, right? So as I previously mentioned that provider should be provider details should be given here, that is AWS region, access key and the secret key, that is it is nothing but username as well as the password, right? So next is security groups. Security groups, why we required, I mentioned in VPC video. Let me just grasp it up. Okay, so we make use of security groups. It's act as a firewall for accessing the resource inside my server. Okay, so what are the requests, or how the from where the request should come and to where the request should go, we're going to mention it here, right? So we're going to name, that is resource AWS security group. In AWS I'm using the resource called security group, and here I have used tag as a, or the reference name as it's showing, that GTS API, and I'm naming it as GTS API for my security group description, whatever you want. Okay, ingress is nothing but whatever the request that is coming to my server. So I'm establishing the server 3306, that is to my RDS. So I just established my connection or the communication between my RDS to my server. Okay, that is database servers to web server. Like that, we can. What are the protocol we are using, and if we have any specific CIDR notation or the unique IP address, we can mention it there. So here I have mentioned all, that is for if I want to allow all the traffic from this port number, I'll be using like this format. Okay, again here 4728 is my microservice port number. So I wanted to allow it to make communication between my server as well as database also. For that purpose I make use of it. Even this is also the same as one of my microservice. And here I have mentioned from port 0 to port 0, that is I have mentioned apart from these three ports I am allowing even other ports, that is I haven't mentioned any particular ports, that is all the traffic irrespective of port everyone can able to access. So why I have mentioned here is because I going to test my application in my postman. So for that purpose this port should be open to all, or else I could not able to access. Since the postman owns its own port number, if I want to mention that I can mention. If not, I just mention for all. This is only for testing purpose I will be using, right? Ingress. To establish communication or to communicate with my server, I will be using the SSH protocol. That is my 22 port number. Egress in the sense from server to the outside the world or the internet I am using. So I will allow all. So irrespective of constraint, I'll be using. And thereafter, I'll be using or I'll be creating the RDS, that is relational database system. So resource AWS DB instance, that is database instance resource, and again the reference number I'm creating for, or I'm giving it for my RDS. Next is identifier. So identifier is nothing but the name, what I wanted to view in my data, and the engine. So we have many engines, that is MySQL, PostgreSQL, and many other things, and the instance. Even the database server owns the RAM, everything, right? So that will is the name of the tag. This ones, that is a dbt4g. This is the instance class I'm using it, and thereafter I will be providing my database name and my database login credential and the storage, how much GB I want, and here DB subnet group name. So even why we required subnet, everything I have explained in another video. So here also I will be creating the separate subnet for my database, and I will name it as like this, and the VPC security. So in which VPC, that is in which private cloud I need to create my RDS, that is AWS security group dot gts dot api dot id. So this is the group where I'm going to create. So the, how you know that this is my, that is a VPC security group means, just revert back, look here, AWS security group dot the reference AGTS API, isn't it same? Dot id means I will be using that as id. So here, okay. So next, do I require to replicate my data into multiple zones? If I want, I'll just pass the value as 2 boolean value. If not, I don't want my data to be replicated anywhere else apart from one zone. Just I pass it as false. Next is storage type. What kind of storage? Like we have HSD, SSD like that. In cloud we have this one. Okay, and the backup retention period. So how frequently you require a backup? So in case of crash of RDS, data one cannot be retrieved, right? So on that case, we can mention how many days, how frequently the backup needs to be taken like that. Okay. So next, the snapshot. Snapshot is nothing but it will going to create the snapshot or the screenshot. We can say that if I shot this screen, whatever the content I want here, I will be kept it as one copy, right? Likewise, whatever the configuration my RDS wants as well, same configuration without providing these credential, I can just revert or the retain or backup the thing to get back my all configuration. For that purpose, we make use of the short, that is snapshot. So just it will consume more space and it is chargeable. That's why I just make it true. Just observe here, I am skipping the final snapshot. I don't want that image to be copied or taken for backup in future cases. I don't want that. So I just pass true. And does my RDS to be accessed publicly? If I want, I will pass true. If I don't want, I will pass false. Okay. So here I am creating RDS subnet. So probably here DB subnet group, right? Look here, AWS DB subnet group, AWS DB subnet dot DB subnet group dot name. So my DB subnet group. So it will fetch the details from here to here, and this is my subnet. So we need to provide at least two subnets. So based on the availability of IPs, it will choose on its own and it will going to create. So these details will be fetched from the UI itself. And firstly, I provided the user, and that is a provider in which area I need to create my resource, and I have provided the firewall details and what are the network and what are the traffic needs to be allowed and what are the traffic needs to be moved. Thereafter, I created the database, and to interact with that database and to fetch and to store the data, I need some server, right? So for that purpose, I will be using the EC2 here. So resource, that is AWS instance, my Ubuntu instance. This is the reference name I am providing here. And IMA is nothing but Amazon Image Identity, right? So for Ubuntu, here I am using the Ubuntu. So for Ubuntu, I have this code. For Linux, Windows, Mac, we will be having the different. So this number or the tag will be get from the that is EC2 console of IAM catalog, and the instance type, that is CPU and the cache, how many things have. And we required some key, right, for authentication to access that results. So it should be created priorly. If not, we can create and we can embed it here. So the name should be provided. So the key name should be provided here. And in what security group I say. So I want my resources to be in the single security group. So that's the reason I am using the again same security group, that is AWS security group dot gts api dot id. So followed by the name of my server here. Okay, so once the server is installed, then I don't want my to visit my server, and I want install separately my SQL software in my server to interact with my RDS. So just I pass the user data as a file. Okay, so sudo apt update, so it looks for any Ubuntu updates. If there, it will update. Next, apt install mysql server, so it will install this software inside my server, and it will start it automatically once the instance is launched, and it will throw me back with my instance IP as well as RDS endpoint. So if I you require, so this is how exactly the Terraform file will going to look. So this is here I am just creating RDS and EC2, that's it. So in production line, in live things, they're going to create many things. They will be maintaining different files. They won't create all resources in single file. For EC2, they'll create another file. For RDS, they'll create another file. They're going to inherit the variable properties, how exactly the oops concept will going to work. Like that, they will going to inherit and they integrate things, right? And if I want to make automation, for example, that is I create a pipeline to deploy my resources. That is to create my resources, not deploy, create my resources without any intervention, just by triggering, by using the Git webhook, right? So here I'm creating the pipeline, and here I'm using the tool Terraform. So I'm working on Terraform, right? Just for that purpose, I'm using the tool called Terraform. I'm using here Terraform. Okay, next this stage. So I'm pulling the details of the file from this GitHub URL of the credential of this. Since it's a private repo, the credential ID should be provided. If not, even the automation cannot be achieved here. So thereafter, I have passed what are the steps it should move on before execution. So initialization, plan it, and then it will apply. So even after plan, we need to provide, that is approval. So after verifying the plan, we need to provide. So it will throw me that based on this file, I am asked to create one EC2 instance. So it will, in the plan section, it will show me that modification is got one. They have asked me to create EC2 instance. Shall I continue? Like that, it will ask for the permission. So for that auto approval, I will given. And while creation also, it will re-verify it. So are you sure you want to create EC2 instance? Yes. Without any permission, you can just go on. For that, priorly I approved it. Okay. So if I want to destroy that resources without moving on to each resource and deleting it, just by passing this one, I can delete. So same thing will be passed here also, but only the difference is here Terraform destroy hyphen target is equal to, I will be passing the reference one, right? So just look out here, AWS instance my Ubuntu instance, right? What I need to be destroyed, target AWS instance dot my Ubuntu instance. I need to destroy that. So for that purpose, we make use of this reference number. Or else, if we have, you might ask, so we have a plenty of resources created in one Terraform. So do I require to provide all the reference number of each resources? No, it's not required. If we have embedded in one environment, so we can just target is equal to that is we going to provide all the references will be of same name. Just provide that that is GTS Jenkins or the Terraform, like that we will provide. So all the reference under that particular resource will be destroyed. So without any intervention. So this is all about Terraform and the Terraform automation using the Jenkins, and the I have shown some snippets how exactly will be of, and So why do we require Terraform? How exactly the Terraform is differ from Ansible, and how it is going to work? This is a quite I haven't deep dive into the Terraform thing. Almost an introductory level I have given the presentation. So this is all about the Terraform. So if you have know that this exactly why we require Terraform and some basic syntax, how exactly it will look, definitely this is more than enough to be a Terraform that is a SRE role. Thank you.